Hey coders, what's up? It's me, Webs here from Slide Nerd. If you go to YouTube Slide Nerd playlist, in the previous video, which comes under material design, I talked about how we can use the Android Job Scheduler API. If you haven't seen this video, please check it out because otherwise you're not going to understand anything in this video. So first, let's see how we can set up the Job Scheduler service for both Lollipop and Pre-Lollipop with the help of the Job Scheduler Compact library that we have available, which is made by some guy called Evant. Now, before you start anything, please read this warning here which says all job scheduler features are implemented. However, this library has not been well tested, so I would advise not using it in production at this time. There are no guarantees that this will not run down your device or cause your device to explode. So this is not an official version of Google's Job Scheduler API. We are gonna work with this because you guys would be curious otherwise to know how to run this on Pre-Lollipop. So the first thing that we do is add this compile time dependency. So let's go here to our project back here and go to the build.gradle file, paste the dependency, and then click sync project with Gradle files at the top. So once you're done with that, you see Android Studio will automatically download the library and it will say Gradle build successful, hopefully. Coming back to Android Studio, I've created a new package here called services. Just right click here, say new Java class and say my service as the class name. Click OK. Make sure that this is added to Git as well if you're saving on GitHub, and simply say extends, and here we can say job service, and as you can see there are two of them. There is one which says android.app.job, the other one is me.tatarka.support.job. The one that we want to select in our case would be the second one because the first one is available only on API 21 plus. It says class my service must be declared abstract or implement the method on start job. So let's go ahead and press alt enter, implement the methods. It's on start job and on stop job, and there you go with the implementation of the job service. The next thing that we need to do is register the service in the manifest file, and that's pretty simple. Again, you simply go to Android manifest and you add an entry for a service inside the application by simply saying service here. You pass the name as my service, which Android Studio, as you saw, can automatically detect. The next two attributes that you need to specify is whether the service is available to the outside components or not. For that, use the Android exported attribute. We say true here. So let's first take a look at what this Android exported attribute actually does. If you go to the documentation of service, Android exported can take either false or it can take true. Now by default, if there are no intent filters, then it's going to take the default value of false. It simply means whether or not the components of other applications can invoke the service and interact with it. True if they can and false if they cannot. Now in our case, the job scheduler service is not going to be called by any of your components. It's going to be the system and the framework components that are going to call the job scheduler service. Hence we need to make sure that it's exported and available to applications that are outside our app, which is why we need to set the default value of true here. By the way, if you happen to go to YouTube user slide nerd playlist, here Android processes, threads and services is the place where I'll be having videos on services. At the time of making this video, there is nothing on services, but by the time you're watching, there may be a lot of videos on services. So be sure to check this playlist out as well. Coming back to our manifest, we need to add a permission here, and that permission is going to be android.permission.bindJobService. If you take a look at the documentation for that as well, it says the job services must be protected with this permission. If a job service is declared in the manifest but not protected with this permission, the service will be ignored by the OS. So just in case you missed this permission, your job service is not going to run, and you're going to come in the comments of this video and you're going to ask me why this is not running, which is why I told you in advance. So going back to the video, let's go ahead and add some more permissions that we need with the job scheduler service. In addition to the internet permission, we have added three more permissions here for three different things. The first one is called wake lock. As you see the documentation, it simply says allows using the power manager to keep the processor from sleeping or the screen from dimming. In other words, if the job scheduler service gets some new data, you want your device to immediately turn on and tell what is going on if you use the wake lock permission out here. Other than that, there is access network state, which is needed if you're using the set required network type. Of course, we will take a look at this method when we see the job info and the job info.builder classes. Other than that, there is receive boot completed. You want to add this permission if you want the job scheduler service to run even after you restart or reboot your device. The next and most important question of all, where to create the service? Should it be inside our fragment box office or should it be inside the main activity? Let's try to look at our app and understand this better. So here in the second fragment, which is fragment box office, we load new data with the help of the service every 24 hours or 10 hours or so. The third fragment, which is fragment upcoming, also needs data in a similar way. It is going to have the latest list of upcoming movies loaded into it every 24 hours or 10 hours or so. But the first fragment, which is fragment search, doesn't need data loading in the background. In other words, the user will enter something in a search view or an edit text and hit enter, and all you got to do is load the data immediately inside this fragment. So as such, the job scheduler is needed for two fragments and not for the first one. So we are going to create it inside our main activity, because inside our fragment we would need a job scheduler for this and we would need another job scheduler for this as well. So let's keep it common inside our main activity by going up here and saying job scheduler instance. So we can simply say private job scheduler. And again, there are two objects. Notice one is android.app.job, the other is Tatarka support job. Take the second one and we'll say m job scheduler here. So the way you get an instance to this job scheduler is very simple. You go inside your on create and you say m job scheduler equals to job scheduler dot get instance, and here you pass the context, which would be this in our case. Now on pre-lollipop devices, this is going to work with the help of the support library. On lollipop devices, this is going to say context dot get system service job scheduler service, and it's going to initiate that job scheduler that way. In the last video, I discussed the constraints that you can specify while creating a job service. So now let's create the constraints by making a method here called construct job. And simply we go here and say job info dot builder. Now again, notice that there are two of them. Take the Tatarka one. So job info dot builder. Builder is new job info dot builder. So there are two things that the job info.builder class requires. The first is a job ID. The second one is the name of the service that is going to work as our job service. So the first thing can be simply stated as job ID in our case, which is going to be a static constant integer. Second is going to be a component name. We can simply say new component name here. Pass two things, that is the package, the context, and the class name. The context in our case will be this because it's an activity. The class name in our case can be myService.class here. So that takes care of constructing. And of course, let's create this request ID by pressing Alt Enter, create the constant field job ID, give it a value of 100 if you want. You can give it any value, it's up to you. So going down to the same method in the construct job info.builder, let's find out what the job info.builder actually does as per the documentation. If you come to our job info class, you will notice that it's added in API level 21 on the right side, and it acts as the container which is going to have all our parameters needed to schedule the work with the help of the job info.builder. Now the job info.builder, if you notice, it has the constructor which we just created. It has a job ID and a component name indicating the name of the job service that we want to start. Other than that, there are some nice methods which I'm going to show you right here. Setback of criteria method allows you to decide how you want to retry things. If the job fails, should you try after 5 seconds first? If that fails, try after 10 seconds. If you're going to double your time, or if you're going to work on a non-linear time, then use the back off policy exponential. Otherwise, you use the back off policy linear. The extras, the set extras method that you see here allows you to pass extra data from your activity to the job scheduler service. Set minimum latency, as you can see, it says specify the job service should be delayed by the amount of time. But this is going to throw an illegal argument exception if your job is periodic, which is true in our case. Set override deadline lets you specify a deadline. It says the job will be run by this deadline even if the other requirements are not met. It doesn't make sense to set this property in a periodic job, and therefore will throw an illegal argument exception. The most important method that we need would be set periodic, where we can specify how many times or what is the frequency of running our job. So you go here, it says the job should recur within the provided interval, not more than once per period. Now you have no control over within this interval will be executed. The only guarantee that it will be executed at most once within this interval. The set persisted to indicate that we want to reboot our device and our job scheduler should still work. But for that, we need the permission receive boot completed, which if you remember is already added. So next comes set required network type. Notice it says not calling this function means that network is not necessary. But calling this function defines network as a strict requirement for your job. If the network requested is not available, your job will never run. So keep this in mind while you're using the network connections out in your job scheduler service. Other than that, the set requires charging, which indicates that your device needs to be charging while you want to perform this job if you want to do this. And then there's of course set required device idle, which indicates that the device should be in idle mode for running your job. This defaults to false as you can see here. So now that you've seen the methods that we can construct our job service with, let's go to Studio and construct it. So we simply go here and say builder dot, and as you see there are several options available. The first thing that we need is periodic, run every 2 seconds for starters to just see if it works. Then we need to make sure that we need the network. So here we say set required network type, and we are going to use the network type unmetered. We also want to make sure that our job scheduler runs even if the device is rebooted. So we set persist here and we say true here, and then we build it by simply saying build. Now if you want to send any extra parameters from your activity to the job scheduler service, you will use the persistible bundle class here by saying persistible bundle is new persistible bundle. You can read the documentation for this method. It simply means a bundle that is stored across activity screen rotation and orientation changes. So inside this you can put stuff by saying put string, put end, put long, whatever you want. And here at the bottom, once you have put your stuff, you can simply say set extras here and pass the persistible bundle object inside. Now I haven't decided whether we need to send something for now, so let's keep it without the persistible bundle. Last but not the least, use your job scheduler object, which is mJobScheduler, call schedule on it, and pass the job info object that we just constructed. In fact, we did not construct any. We'll have to make it by saying builder.build over here, and I will remove the build from above here. So that takes care of setting our job info object. Now we need to call this method construct job inside our on create after we have created our job scheduler instance. So we can say construct job here. So going to our job service class, which is inside services in the my service, I'm going to simply have a toast message inside this indicating whether things are working or not. I'll simply say this here for the context, and then I'll pass the message saying on start job. So every time our job runs, this toast message is going to print out and we are going to know if things are working or not. Now if you go to the job service class and you read the documentation all the way at the bottom for the onStart job method, it returns a boolean. It says true if your service needs to process the work on a separate thread, otherwise it's false. In our case, currently we are going to return false because we are not using a separate thread. So going back, we have returned false here, exactly. So let's run this job and find out what is happening. So there's our onStart job being called, and it's being called here in Lollipop as well. But now if you notice, Lollipop is going to keep triggering the job scheduler service, whereas your pre-Lollipop devices are just going to sit idle. Now if you rotate the screen on both of them, you will notice that onStart job is called once again for the pre-Lollipop devices, but that's it. Your Lollipop keeps doing stuff, whereas your pre-Lollipop device is not doing anything, and you're wondering what is going on. And that is because you haven't read the documentation carefully, have you? So you go back and you see this method which is called job finished right above the onStart job. It says call back to inform the job manager that you've finished executing. This can be called from any thread because it will ultimately run on your main thread. You can specify the behavior, what you want to do with this needs reschedule parameter. In other words, let's say that you executed the job and something failed and you want to do the same job again. In that case, you can put the boolean needs reschedule parameter as true, and that will work. There you see it says true if the job should be rescheduled according to the backoff criteria you specified, otherwise false. So we go back to our code here and we call the job finished, indicating that our work is actually done. We pass the same job parameters, and for the reschedule part we simply say false for now. But in the real app that we are going to make in the next video, we are going to have to check whether there is Wi-Fi, there is network, the JSON request worked, whether Wally gave an error, and based on that decide whether we should reschedule or not. So let's go ahead and run this on both pre-Lollipop and Lollipop devices now and find out what is happening. So things are running once again. You have the 29 rows fetched. There's on start job being called, and as you notice, there's on start job call on both of them this time in different timings. So that is working perfectly. So if you rotate the screen here, let's see what happens. You go ahead and you rotate the screen. The on start job is getting called every 4 seconds in our case. Now if we exit the activity by pressing back on both places, it still works. Now you're welcome to try rebooting the device and tell me in the comments whether this is working or not, because right now I'm feeling too lazy to reboot the device. Everything is working fine. What next? Here, if you come back to fragment box office, you notice our send JSON request method. Inside the response, we actually edit our list movies and set the adapter. How are we going to do this if the send JSON request method is placed inside a service, which is my service? There are three strategies. One is to have a broadcast receiver from the service send new data to our activity and then load the data inside our recycler view. Or two, we can have the service write to a database and then load the data from that database here inside our fragment box office. Or three, we can use a library like event bus or auto to transmit the data from my service when we are finished executing and gathering the JSON data and send it back to our fragment box office where we can handle the data. Which of these techniques do you think is the best? What would you do in this situation? In the next video, I'm waiting for your answer to proceed. Let me know what you think in the comments below. In the meantime, if you like what you saw, please like this video, share this video, subscribe to Slide Nerd, and let me know your thoughts in the comment boxes below. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Have a nice day.